So, friends, I have such exciting news. I now have 61 whole subscribers. That's so amazing because it means my plan to totally dominate YouTube has now come to fruition. Today, 61 subscribers. Tomorrow, well, probably 61 subscribers. But, by the year 3000, I might have Markiplier numbers. Anyway, I have another request. Frank's journey always has such good ideas. So the giant and the tailor will have to wait for another day. I can't imagine anyone was waiting for it anyway. Today, I will read from that amazing wordsmith and heart wrenching manipulative man who left the poor little mermaid to wander the earth as an air spirit, Hans Christian Andersen. I can only hope he's not so mean to us this time. Oh, although I believe he also wrote The Little Match Girl. What have I gotten myself into? I am suddenly quite nervous to read to you The Snow Queen, a tale in a, a tale in 7 stories. 7 stories? Oh my. Either this will be a really long video, or I'm going to have to take a break and put this in parts. All right, friends, get comfortable. Attention, please. Oh, that wasn't me, that was the story. Attention, please. We're going to begin. When we've got to the end of the story, we shall know more than we know now. Yes. What an odd way to start a story. There was a wicked troll. He was one of the very worst sort. He was the devil. Make up your mind, Hans. Was he a troll or was he the devil? It seems important. One day he was in a very temper, for he had made a looking glass, which had the property that everything good and pretty that was reflected in it shriveled away to almost nothing. But everything that was no good and looked ugly came out plain and showed even worse than it was. Goodness, why use one word when you can use 60? I think I know why this story is so long. I now present to you The Snow Queen, paraphrased and summarized by Artie. And the next paragraph tells you it's a very bad mirror, but in really lovely and flowery ways. Everyone who attended the troll school, for he kept a troll school, spread the news all about that a miracle had come to pass. You could now see, they said, what the world of mankind really looked like. They ran about everywhere with the glass, and at last there wasn't a country or a person left who hadn't been distorted in it. After that, they decided to fly up to heaven itself and make fun of the angels and of God. The higher they flew with the glass, the more it grimaced, till they could scarcely keep hold of it. Grimaced? Huh. Per Webster's, grimace, noun, a facial expression, usually of disgust, disapproval, or pain, a grimace of hate and rage. The mirror had a face? With expressions? Why would that make the mirror harder to hold? Up and up they flew, nearer to God and his angels, and then the glass quivered so fearfully with grimacing that it fell out of their hands. You keep using this word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And was dashed to the ground below, where it broke into lots of pieces. Hans uses more words, and flew about in the wide world. And when they got into people's eyes, they stuck there, and people either saw everything crooked or else had only eyes for what was wrong in everything. I, I think I know someone who has a mirror in their eye. Oh, sorry, back to the story. For every little splinter of the glass had kept the same power that the whole glass had. Some people even got a little bit of the glass into their hearts, and that was horrible, for the heart became just like a lump of ice. Well, and the rest of the paragraph is all about how evil they become. End of first part. Wow, well, this will surely be a happy story. Help me. I wonder when Elsa and Anna come into the story. Second, the story. Wait, I apologize. Story the second. A little boy and a little girl. In a big town where there are so many houses and people that there isn't enough room for everybody to have a little garden, and where, in consequence, most people have to content themselves with flowers in pots, there were two poor children who had a garden somewhat bigger than a flower pot. They weren't brother and sister, but they were as fond of each other as if they had been. Their parents were near neighbors, living in two attics where the roof of the one house touched the other, and the gutter ran along the caves. A small window in each house faced the other. You had only to step across the gutter, and you could get from one window to the other. How tall are these houses? Because that could be very dangerous. The parents had, each of them, a large wooden box outside the window, and it grew kitchen herbs which they used, and also a little rose tree. Tree? Not bush? Flower? Climbing vine? They were growing trees out of attic windows? Oh, this seems like a bad idea. There was one in each box, and they flourished wonderfully. Then the parents thought of putting the boxes across the gutter in such a way that they reached almost from one window to the other, and really looked like two bunches of flowers. Then pea plants hung down over the boxes, and the rose trees put out long branches and twined about the windows and bent over to meet each other and made almost a triumphal arc of leaves and blossoms. This all sounds beautiful, Professor Tolkien, but is there a story in here somewhere? The boxes were very high up, and the children knew they must not climb up into them, but they were often allowed to get out to meet each other and sit on their little stools beneath the roses, and they used to play very happily in winter. Of course, that pleasure was gone. The windows were often quite frozen over, but then they would heat copper pennies on the stove and put the hot pennies on the frosty pane and shatter the frozen glass. Right. You know what? I'm bored. Let's just skim the beautiful prose to He was called Kay, and she Gerda. In summer, they could go to each other with a single jump. In winter, they had first to go down a lot of stairs and then up a lot of stairs while the snow came drifting outside. These are white bees swarming, said the old grandmother. Have they got a queen too? Asked the little boy, for he knew that bees have one. Indeed they have, said grandmother. She flies where they swarm the thickest. She is the biggest of them all, and she never stays on the ground, but flies up again in the black cloud. Many a winter night she flies through the streets of the town and peeps in at the windows, and then they freeze into wonderful patterns like flowers. Yes, I've seen that, said both the children, and they knew it was true. Can the Snow Queen get in here? Asked the little girl. Hans, I appreciate that you took the time to name your characters. The Grimm brothers almost never do. But what do you say we actually start using these names now? I have come to an understanding. Hans Christian Andersen is a wonderful writer who paints a beautiful picture for patient children willing to sit and listen. The Grimm brothers are barely coherent hack writers who get straight to the point. I can respect that. Let her come, said the boy, and I'll put her on a hot stove and yep, right. I know that if it were a cold winter night by the fire, this would be a wonderful story. But this is a silly little YouTube channel. So let's find out the actual story here. Let's see. Kay looks out the window, and there he sees the Snow Queen. Dun dun dun, looking back at him. And she's really pretty, and he's frightened, and it's tomorrow, and now it's summer. 3 paragraphs. Okay, great. Kay and Gerda were sitting looking at a picture book with beasts and birds in it, and then, just as the clock in the great church tower was striking 5, Kay said, "Oh, something has pricked my heart, and I've just got something in my eye." The little girl put her arm around his neck, and he winked his eye, but now there was nothing to be seen. "I think it's gone," he said, but it wasn't. It was one of those tiny bits that were broken off the glass. The troll glass. You remember about that. Ha! He actually wrote, "You remember about that," as if even he knows he talks too much. I'm not sure if that's sad or impressive. I was wondering why we were learning about the Satan trolls at the beginning. That horrid glass which made everything. Stopping you right there, Hans, because I do remember, and I don't need another paragraph of description. Kid got one in his eye and one in his heart. He's doomed! Oh, and instantly, too. He starts right in on how everything is awful, destroys some flowers, and freaks Gerda out, and continues to be a brat until winter. Many examples. However, oddly enough, the glass in his eye makes the snow look nicer. Maybe the Satan troll liked snow. So the brat, I mean Kay, takes his sled out to the main road to play in traffic. Out there in the square, the boldest of the boys often used to tie their sleds to a farmer's cart and drive a good long way with it. It was an excellent fun. At the height of their sport, a large sleigh came by. It was painted white all over, and in it was someone wrapped in a shaggy white fur and wearing a shaggy white cap. The sled drove twice around the square, and little Kay made haste and tied his own little sled to it, and drove off with it. Faster and faster it went into the next street. The driver turned its head and nodded to Kay in a friendly way. It seemed as if they knew each other. Every time Kay thought of loosing his sled, the driver nodded again. So Kay stayed where he was, and they drove right out through the town gate. Then the snow began to fall so thick that the boy couldn't see his hand before him, and he drove on, and he hastily loosed the rope so as to let go of the big sled. But it made no difference. His little trap held fast to it, and it went like the wind. He called out loudly, but no one heard, and the snow drifted down, and the sled flew onward. Sometimes it made a bound as if it were going over a ditch or fences, but he was in a dreadful fright. He tried to say the Lord's Prayer, but he couldn't remember it. All that came out was the multiplication table. Boy, I hate it when that happens. Our Father who art in heaven, 2 times 2 is 4. The snowflakes grew bigger and bigger, till at last they looked like large white hens. Suddenly they parted. The big sled pulled up, and the person who was driving it rose. The fur and the cap were all of snow. It was a lady, tall and slender, shining white. The Snow Queen! Dun, dun, dun! That was a very dramatic reveal, actually. So it turns out that she has one of those cool amnesia kisses, like in Superman 2, and she straight up kidnaps Kay. Lots of beautiful description. End of chapter. Huh. Story the third. The flower garden of the old woman who knew magic. But how fared little Gerda when Kay came back no more? Where could he be? Nobody knew. Nobody could tell. So they asked around, found out he left with a large sleigh, and decided he's probably dead, the little brat. I mean, poor kid. Everyone cries, and now it's spring. Now we find out that Gerda suffers from delusions. The sunshine and swallows tell Gerda that Kay is still alive, so she goes to the river and trades her new red shoes for a boat ride to find Kay. Mind you, she trades them with the river. She's afraid, but the talking birds help, and she feels better, and she ends up way downriver in a beautiful garden cared for by an old woman with flowers on her hat. Lots and lots of description. The old woman takes Gerda in and decides to keep her because why not, right? So she makes all those roses disappear so nothing will remind Gerda of Kay and just keeps her. But she forgot the one on her hat, and after a really long time, Gerda sees the rose and remembers what she had been doing. So the flowers tell her that Kay is not dead, and then each and every flower tells her a story that has nothing to do with the main one, until Gerda runs away without any shoes and realizes it's autumn. End of chapter. Well, well, that was a waste of time. Does the word tangent mean anything to you, Hans? Story the fourth. A Prince and Princess. Gerda had to rest herself again, and there, hopping over the road, right in front of where she sat, was a large crow. Back to talking birds. The birds tell Gerda he's seen Kay, maybe, and he'll show her the kingdom where the possible Kay is living and has married a princess. This takes 3 pages. 3 pages of the crow telling the longest story possible about this kid who could be Kay. They are able to get into the castle because the crow is engaged to a tame crow who lives there. Sure, why not? They sneak in where the couple is sleeping by following their dreams. Literally. And Gerda calls out, only to find it's not Kay. So the prince and princess, who are really nice people, dress Gerda for the weather, give her a nice carriage and horses, and send her on her way to hunt for Kay. End of chapter. Scheherazade had them 1,000 tales. Story the fifth, The Little Robber Girl. They were driving through the dark forest, but the coach shone like a blaze and dazzled the eyes of the robbers, and they couldn't stand it. It's gold! It's gold! They shouted. It's another tangent, Artie said in exasperation. Ah, right. Gertie gets taken by robbers who plan to eat her, but the little robber girl says no because she wants to keep her. What about Gerda is so keepable? Anyway, the little robber girl also keeps a lot of animals she has captured. She's kind of a I will love them and hug them and call them George type. More talking animals tell Gerda where Kay really is. He is with the Snow Queen. Dun dun dun. Little Elmira Dud decides that Gerda is really nice, so she lets her go with a reindeer that she had captured so they can go and find Kay. And there's really a lot of animal mistreatment in this part of the story, so yeah, end of chapter. Story the sixth, The Lap and the Fin Woman. They stopped at a small house. A wretched place it was. The roof reached down to the ground, and the door was so low that the family had to crawl on their stomachs when they wanted to get in or out. There was nobody home but an old Lap woman. Lap woman? Google, help me. The Sami people, traditionally known in English as Laps or Laplanders, are an indigenous Finno-Ugric people inhabiting the Arctic area of Sapmi, which today encompasses parts of the northern Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia. We learned so much together. Who stood roasting fish at an oil lamp, and the reindeer told her Gerda's story. But first, he told his own story, for he considered that it was much more important. And no, you don't. We are not going to stop. You stop scrolling. I'm not telling it. We are not going off on another tangent. We are getting to Kay and the Snow Queen if it kills me. So, the Thin Woman knows all about this stuff and tells the reindeer that Gerda doesn't need anything but magic to help, because the magic was the power of friendship all along, or something, and tells him to bring Gerda to the garden of the Snow Queen and leave her there. So he does. Then she gets attacked by really big snow, but she actually remembers the Lord's Prayer, and it turns into angels and kicks the snow's butt. And then she's in the Queen's palace. End of chapter. And then Han writes, but now we must see how little Kay is getting on. He certainly wasn't thinking about little Gerda, and least of all that she was just outside the palace. And all I can think is, are we going to finish the main plot line now, or do we get to hear every snowflake's life story? Story the seventh. What happened in the Snow Queen's palace, and what happens after that? The walls of the palace were of drifted snow, and the windows and the doors were beautiful. Yes, skipping ahead. Stop scrolling. Stop it. I'm not reading it. Stop it. Little Kay was blue with the cold, nay, almost black, but he didn't notice it, for the Snow Queen had kissed the shivers out of him, and his heart was practically a lump of ice. He went about dragging a number of sharp-edged flat pieces of ice which he was arranging in every possible pattern. and trying to make something of them, just as you and I have little flat bits of wood and arrange them in patterns. A Chinese puzzle, it's called. Kay, too, went on making patterns of the most elaborate kind, the intellectual ice puzzle. To his thinking, these patterns were most remarkable and of the very greatest importance. This was the effect of the grain of glass that was stuck in his eye. He put together patterns to form a written word, but he never could succeed in putting out the exact word that he wanted, which was the word eternity. The Snow Queen had said, "If you can find me that pattern, you shall be your own master, and I'll make you a present of the whole world and a new pair of skates." Oh boy, the whole world and skates too! Mind you, you'll be a casicle by then, but oh well. But he couldn't manage it. So, so the Snow Queen was off doing her job, snow queening, and Kay was all alone and freezing to death without a care in the world when Gerda finds him. Then little Gerda wept hot tears, which fell on his bosom and pierced through his heart and thawed that lump of ice that consumed the little bit of glass that was there. He looked at her, and she sang the hymn, "The roses grow in the valley where we meet the Jesus child." Then Kay burst into weeping. I didn't think the song was that bad. He wept so that the grain of glass ran down out of his eye, and then he knew her, and he cried out in joy, "Gerda, darling little Gerda, wherever have you been all this time? And where have I been? And no, 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 no. We are not going to recap. We have just gone through 18 pages of this. No! Stop. So they walk hand in hand backwards through the whole story, meeting everyone as they pass, and they get news about what happened, and then they get back home, but now they're adults, and they sit with Grandma again because she's still alive, and that's it. It's over. That's the whole story. We're done. Done, I say. Done! They never once mentioned Olaf or Kristoff, but I actually believe that Hans is clearly the villain here. And it's all descriptions. I mean, descriptions and tangents. 20 pages of tangents and descriptions. Beautifully written frustration with a tiny story in the middle. There. We have skimmed the Snow Queen. It's basically a story about a kid who gets an evil mirror in his eye and is saved by the power of friendship. But that's it. It's done. If you want me to read the whole 20 pages word for word, let me know, and I'll put it on Patreon because you are going to have to pay me. Well, if you're still with me after all this, thank you. I'll either, I don't know, we're supposed to like and subscribe, and you know what? I'll let the editor take it from here. I think I'm going to quietly pass out.